Welcome to Wise Talk Radio. I'm Heather Criswell, and I'm so thankful to share this time and space with you today. We have a really special guest for you, Jeanne-Marie Paynel, founder and CEO of VoilàMontessori. She's going to share her wisdom and love with you on the Montessori philosophy and how it can help you on your journey through parenthood. Just as a reminder, my intention for this podcast is to create a space where authentic, powerful, and inspiring stories are shared about life, parenting, business, and love. When we listen to another story, it gives us the opportunity to step in their shoes, kind of leaving our own story behind and experience a new perspective, to see life in all its challenges and greatness through another lens. It gives us a chance to access our own wisdom and reignite the power that lies in each and every one of us. And when we do that, we experience love for ourselves, our children, and each other as a community, as a whole, as humanity on this planet. So welcome, Jeanne-Marie. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you, Heather. And I just love your introduction about wisdom and just sharing our stories. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. The backstory on us is we met through, online. And I have been following you for years. And when I lived in San Diego, I was so close to getting to one of your events and just missed it by the hair when we moved. But the wisdom that you're putting out on this planet about Montessori and philosophy and really about parenting, in the sense that we're not here to teach our children necessarily, that we're really here to support them and guide them in their own natural learning wisdom, their own genius, if you will.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about you, how you started VoilàMontessori, and how you got to this space and time right here, right now?
Sure. So, so how did I get here? Well, it's a long story, but about maybe 10, 15 years ago, after having gone to school as a photographer and done graphic design for many years in advertising, there came a time when my husband and I and our children were thinking of moving back to Europe. I'm originally from France. We moved here 18 years ago. And we were, considering moving back. And at that point, I kind of really had to kind of assess where I was at in my life. And I realized that I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore. And so it was really that, inquisitiveness of looking inside, like, what is really my passion? What have I always wished I could have done, and one of them was working with young children. I had always wanted to do that. And for some reason, my path, took me down a different road, and I was kind of discouraged to go into education and such. And so here I am, a 40-some-year-old adult saying, okay, I get to do what I want to do now.
Awesome.
And I went back to school and I got my master's in Montessori education. I kind of researched and found that there was a training center right here in San Diego that is certified to teach everywhere in the world. And so I actually called up some schools in Europe and said, do you know about this certification? And they said, oh, yes, you'd be more than welcome. So I went full force into it, had 2 young children, a very supportive husband, and quit my real day job and went back to school. And was just blown away with all of that I learned, and realized that I had kind of parented as a Montessori adult unbeknownst to me. And really, I had parented really from a place of instincts and just really following my children's lead. And realize that's what Montessori is all about. And really, a quote that we often hear in Montessori is follow the child. And so it was a real eye-opening, and just really found my true passion. And so did my studies and taught in a Montessori classroom for many years. and then realized, probably because I was on the older side of all the teachers and already had my children, parents were often really coming up to me and just very inquisitive about their child's behavior, how they could support them at home, why their child was so different in the Montessori environment than they were at home. And that's really when I had my big aha moment and created VoilàMontessori, to really bring that awareness and that knowledge into homes, into really how we can support and guide our children from the very beginning. So from really, I say from conception through, until they go off to university. And that's what I do with VoilàMontessori is bring the Montessori philosophy into homes, really as a way of understanding human development and understanding our children.
I think that is so powerful and so empowering to parents, especially before they have the children right in your hands, right? So it's just a little bit of research and study before we actually have this baby. I talk about that with my communication game that I created, is that we actually have these conversations before we're in the heat of it, right? Exactly. So we can have a clear mind, clear head. And I love empowering parents in those moments, because what I've realized very quickly over time, working with parents and doing events and speaking, is that I took for granted, because I've worked with over 30,000 kids for 25 years. And I took for granted that experience, because a lot of parents have never actually even experienced babysitting. So they're not really quite sure what it looks like, right? To have, what it looks like to have a child that's acting out, or that seems to be being quote unquote mean, or is really hyper. They oftentimes don't realize that that's a real event that takes place over time, right? Like it's not abnormal, if you will.
That and also just understanding their own reaction to all of this. I mean, I think there's just a lot of work to be done on, kind of reevaluating how we were parented and how we want to do it differently. And so, having a new set of tools, or just being able to be aware of what triggers you when that child is having a very normal tantrum. This is a normal behavior, but how you react to it is going to, empower you to parent in a better way, probably.
Exactly. That it actually is really normal. That's what I really want to get across to a lot of people, that, we have all these checklists and guides of ADHD, pandas, bipolar, all of these things. And quite often, a lot of those checklists can be normal behavior. Obviously, if it's not happening over and over again, we've got another story.
Exactly.
But the one-off where we guide our attention to that space and we said, oh no, maybe they have a problem. And then we start looking for all of these problems, and they eventually show up, right? So
Exactly.
That's what I love what you're doing. So what's the basic premise of Montessori philosophy, as far as, I mean, you talked about follow the child, but what's the basic premise?
So the basic premise, so let's take it just one step backward, just so, I just want to be clear for our listeners, where does Montessori come from? And so the word Montessori is actually a woman's last name, and it was Dr. Maria Montessori, who was the first woman allowed to go to medical school in Italy more than 150 years ago. So she has a special place in my heart as being a pioneer and, a feminist at her time, and really a true genius, in her day and age, and has really shown us, and from all of the observation and research that she did more than 100 years ago, really gave us a window and a view into childhood and what the child was going through, what this whole brain development was going through and such. And today, a lot of what she discovered back then is being proven with brain scans and brain research and all of that. So it's a method, an educational method that is really based in scientific methodology and research.
Yeah, it's amazing that she was, again, one of the geniuses of that time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's funny because I just saw a T-shirt with her photo, and it was what was it about her just. Oh shoot! I'm sorry. I forget the saying. There's a saying going on right now about she persevered.
Yes, she persisted.
She persisted. And it's her, and it was her, because poor, woman, she was not welcome by those men in medical school. She had to do her, dissecting alone at night because they wouldn't have her in the same room as her. It was just, so she was amazing. Wow. She's one of my big heroes, as you can tell. But so she wrote a lot about children, and first her first work with children were actually children that were kind of left to their own in psychiatric wards. They were somewhat ignored, and these are kind of useless children, and it was just very sad. And she actually took a huge interest to them and worked with them and created manipulatives and material to help them understand certain concepts. And there was immense progress that was done. And from there, she thought, well, if this is possible with children that were deemed kind of, that we couldn't educate, what are the possibilities with, so-called normal children? And that's really where she began her great work of really studying the child. And
I love that, seeing the greatness in even the things that are thrown away.
And being she was an amazing advocate for children, for children's rights, for that respect was due upon them. So to nowadays, what the method really is all about is really this idea that we are all born with this very strong life force and this intrinsic need to learn and to adapt to our time, place, and culture. And that children are extremely wise and much more intelligent than we ever give them credit for, and that they know what they need to learn. When you think of the child that first year, the infant is born, and they know right away that they need to figure out how to get up on those 2 feet and walk. Right. And they do it by themselves, just by observing us, just by being aware of their body, and by, really being guided by a very strong life force. And, think of language. In the first 3 years, they are able to learn a foreign language in perfect syntax. And all of this is done in the secrecy of their brain.
I love that. The secrecy of their brain. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so, she's the one that coined the idea of the child having the brain being a sponge, the absorbent mind, which is actually one of her books. And so really the method is really geared around that, of really following what the child is showing us that they need to learn. And that we are there to guide them, and we are there to prepare the environment for them, so that this great moment of adaptation can be done with ease, where we take away some of the obstacles that might be there. And so the method today, like if somebody is looking into a Montessori school, it's really this notion that it is child driven, that it is not an adult who sits up in front of 25 children and decides for them what they are going to learn that day. It is more of a classroom with 25 very individual little human beings that you are guiding, and that you are giving specific lessons because you have observed that Johnny is really interested in discovering a certain activity, or is very intrigued by numbers, and so you're going to give them a specific lesson. Or little Susie really wants to learn how to tie a bow, and so you're going to show her how to do that. And so you're really just encouraging that very deep inquisitiveness and that curiosity that they have in them, and really following what their personal interest is.
I love that, because we are oftentimes not taught to follow our own wisdom, right? It's what everybody else thinks we should be doing. And whether that's in your family of taking over the family business, or going into the military, or being a doctor, oftentimes we as parents have already decided what we think. I wanted to be a great dancer, so instantly, I was like, I want my child to dance, and he doesn't have a real desire to do that right now. So I had to kind of set down my wishes for him and allow him to experience what he wants to experience.
And that's fine. And in that, you can still share your passion. You can still put music on and dance and invite him to dance with you. And maybe something will grow an interest in him. But it's true. It's more about sharing our passions, but not imposing our passions on them.
I love that. Sharing them, but not imposing them. That's beautiful.
Yes. So just to go back to the kind of more the educational method right now. So the idea of it being child driven is really important. Another aspect that I just find really important and really beneficial to the young child is that there are mixed age classrooms. Meaning that we do not separate children by their birthdays, but more by these developmental windows that she observed children flowing in and out of about every 3 years. So that for let's say the preschool ages, we're going to have children about 2.5 to 6 years of age in the same classroom together. And this is really more of a natural aspect because it's like the home. It's with the siblings. Sorry, there's some sound. It's more of a natural environment, just like the family environment where there are siblings, and the young child is going to be so intrigued by what the older child is doing and really thinking, oh, one day I'm going to get to work on that. And it also helps the older child kind of really master some of the skills because they get to teach the younger children and they get to show the younger children how to do certain things. So it's a really beautiful environment of just this natural socialization that goes on. So mixed ages is, for me, is a big piece to it.
It is. It's a huge piece. And I didn't actually even realize what I was doing when I owned my school back in 95, dating myself quite a bit now. But when I owned the school in 95, it was a smaller school. So we actually did combine ages because it just didn't make sense to have 5 different classrooms with 5-10 kids in each
Exactly.
classroom.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
we combined, and what I saw too, aside from the actual learning environment, is it also created this empathy for the older kids as well. They empathized with the younger kids and
Yes.
learned a lot more patience and
Yes.
kindness, and I say learned. They remembered patience and kindness. Let me rephrase that, because I believe that we come with all of that, but oftentimes, when they're in a mess, it goes out the window. But they remembered their greatness and their
They
compassion.
remember, and to me, there's something very wise about a younger child taking care of a even younger one. Like, they seem to be so much like closer to their needs and understanding. It's like this almost this osmosis that goes on, where they're just so much more in tune with the younger child's needs. Like, they understand it because they were there just not too long ago, so it's a beautiful environment to see just how gorgeous they really take care of each other and as guides. So in Montessori, we're not called teachers, we're actually called guides.
I love that.
And the guides, if we do a lot of work on observation. So, for example, when you do your birth to 3 Montessori certification, there's about 250 hours of observation. And that is just quieting your mind and observing with no, preconceived idea, no judgment, and just really watching what the newborn is doing, what the young child is doing. And to me, it's just fascinating. When we learn to get out of the way, they show us, like you say, their greatness, because they are so wise. So to me, it is really beautiful. And there's actually a Montessori quote about knowing that the guide has done a good job in her classroom if she can leave or just step out of the way and sit quietly in a corner, and the classroom just goes on without her. And
It takes care of itself.
It
And
takes completely care of itself. And I have seen it. I have been witness to this, and it is just gorgeous to see 25 children just doing their own thing, taking care of each other. And, you don't need to intervene all the time.
Well, I didn't realize that I was doing a lot of Montessori philosophy in my own school at the time. But again, going back to that, wisdom isn't just for our children, it's for us as well, right?
Exactly.
In that moment,
Exactly.
it felt right to me. It felt like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. And to your point, because I had a smaller school, sometimes I had to step outside of the classroom. Obviously, I was within the vicinity to still see what was going on, but to talk to a parent about something that had happened or to another teacher, but to allow that classroom to just kind of flow the way it was flowing. And they were self-sufficient. They learned communication skills. They learned how to talk to a 2-year-old when you're a 6-year-old. And
Exactly.
the experience that we have had, my son decided he wanted to go to public school. And because all his friends in the neighborhood were going to school when the school year started. And he says, Mommy, I want to go. I want to go. And I was like, are you sure about that, buddy? And he said, no, I want to go. I want to go. And we went. And I'll tell you, he just did not fit into the system in any way, shape, or form. And quite frankly, nor did I. So, I definitely was a co-creator in that experience that system did not work for me. And it's not to put down the public school system. It's that there are so many ways that our children are being pushed into a box that is, I believe, harmful to our humanity. And the experience that my son had was going into a school, and for 6.5 hours, he had 2 10-minute breaks outside. And in that 10 minutes, I realistically, it was about 5 to 6 minutes, because by the time they lined up, by the time they put their lunch boxes down, the actual play time was 5 to 6 minutes.
Right.
And he was doing Common Core in the classroom, which was a bunch of paperwork that he was not interested in, could care less about. And I went into the teacher and I said, what happened to, when I had my preschool, I had kids in kindergarten that I was in charge of to pick up from the school and was interacting with their teachers. And they had water tables and dramatic play areas and block areas and manipulatives and music. And they had all these centers, if you will, for the kids to play. And when I went into his teacher and I said, what happened to water play? What happened to, she said, well, there's my water table. And it was stacked 2 feet high of paperwork.
Aww.
And she said the dramatic play area was over there, but it's gone because we don't have time for that because we are all about Common Core. And it was literally learning everything on a piece of paper. And my son, and I believe most children, do not thrive in that environment.
Right.
And so consequently, he started acting out and created a space where he knew that he could get out of going to the school. And it had manifested over time. Mommy, I don't want to go. Mommy, I don't like the teacher. Mommy, she's mean. Mommy, we don't play. All of those things. And the final tipping point was, Mommy, I really like outside school, but not inside school.
Perfect.
So
good for him. Good for him.
That was a clear indication that, and I the trouble that I have often is that as parents, we feel trapped that, if you don't have the money to put in private school or a Montessori school or whatever, that we're stuck in this public system. And I'm hoping that over time that shifts, however that looks, and give people the opportunity to be more open to experiencing something like the Montessori environment, if that's indeed what lights you and your child up, if it feels good inside.
Yeah. And honestly, there are more and more Montessori public schools opening up across the country. So I'm hoping that is definitely, where we're going towards. And I love that you talked about your son and the idea of movement, excuse me, because one of the very important aspects of the Montessori education as well is this notion of freedom of movement. Movement is life. Movement, the child is moving in prenatal life, and they need movement to figure out what their body is capable of. And to ask a young child to sit still is pure torture. And so movement is really incorporated in the curriculum, in the lessons that we do. I mean, I remember sitting as far away from, the math shelf so that I could have the child, go back and forth and walk back and forth to get material, so that you really incorporate this idea of needing to move our body throughout the lessons. We never, ask them to sit at a particular desk for any amount of time. There are tables or there are rugs that you can unroll and work, on the floor. I was lucky to work in Southern California, so I actually had a big open outdoor space as well, so they could, choose to go work outside or go tend to the garden or whatever, they wanted to do. So freedom of movement is also a very important one. And then one last thing that I want to, mention. Well, there's actually two things about Montessori to me that are very important. One is this idea of preparing the environment for the young child. And this is a lot of what I do when I work privately with families, is really preparing our homes so that the newborn and the young child will have a better time adapting to their time, place, and culture. And so the environment, and really Montessori talks about this when she says, to assist a child, we must provide him with an environment which will enable him to develop freely. So it's really about looking at our physical environment and how we can make just, very small tweaks. I don't believe in having to move and having to have a preschool in our living room. Right. I'm talking about just making the environment one that you can cohabitate with this little person, so that if there are things that you really don't want them to touch, well, get them out of the way so that you don't have to feel stressed about, oh, no, don't touch that. Oh, no, don't do that. It's just like, prepare it. I actually encourage young, families or families that are expecting a little one, is get down on your hands and knees and crawl around your home. See it from their perspective. See it from down low where they're going to be living for, a few years, so that you can kind of just readjust that environment and know that these are very temporary adjustments, that the environment is going to evolve with the child's needs. So
I think that's a huge perspective. We've given, I tell people to give their toddlers cameras, right? And even my own son, he takes a picture of me the way he sees me, and I'm like this giant, literally towering over him. Yeah. And I'm pretty tall anyway, so I'm like this giant. And I looked at the picture he took, and I was like, dear God, that could be scary, just looking at it from his perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the one last thing, and all of this, I really need to emphasize that Montessori is a method, created by Dr. Montessori. She was very humble in saying, I did not create this. I just let the children guide me. So she never copyrighted the Montessori method. So there are many schools that will call themselves Montessori, but are kind of missing some of the authentic points or some of the philosophy, such as, the mixed age group that I mentioned earlier. And then one very, very important one to me is this notion of uninterrupted work cycles, meaning that we need to respect to the utmost, respect the child's concentration and the child's flow. We tend to constantly be interrupting our children, especially in more kind of traditional school settings where, every 30 minutes we are telling them to put their work away and go work on something else, and it's music time and it's math time, and, you have to go outside. So here, for the young child, I was working with 2.5 to 6-year-olds. We had a 3-hour work cycle in the morning where that's all we did. We just worked on what we wanted to work on, so that there was no interruption, so that you can really give the child the opportunity to really be in their flow.
And it also allows, exactly, and innately, I did this with my own school, is that it allows them the opportunity to really focus on what feels good to them. And when we do that, it allows them the space to grow in that space and really thrive. And sometimes, to your point, oftentimes I'd get really upset with myself because I was like, oh, I didn't fulfill my curriculum because, again, I had this notion of what I was supposed to be doing as a preschool teacher. And, I didn't fulfill my curriculum. We didn't make the penguins with the, and they color the penguins and put the foil on for the shoes, we didn't do that. And the value, what I've realized over time, was sometimes just letting them play and experience what they wanted to experience, whether it was building blocks or dramatic play or art or writing on the whiteboard or pretending to be a teacher and read books, whatever that was for them, allowing them to have that space to grow. And it's challenging because we as parents, as people, are often, we're interrupters. We're like, okay, well, now let's do this because we want to get the most out of everything, and realizing that the most is often the simplicity of it all.
Right. And to really, sit back and let them, especially the young child, for them to master a new skill or to master a concept, they need time for repetition. if you've noticed, in a young child, once they're figured something out, they're going to repeat it over and over and over again. And this is just their, innate sense of wanting to master this new skill. They're going to just repeat it as many times as they need to feel accomplished and to feel they've mastered it, and then they'll move on. So this gives them this time frame where, if that little girl that was interested in learning how to tie a bow, if she repeats that lesson 15 times, that's fine by me, because that is what her life force is asking her to do. And so I'm respecting it.
And it translates into adults, right? Just When I got on to the podcast with you, I was like, okay, I practiced your name 100 times before we got on, so I could mess it all up. But I had to have that experience for myself of repeating it over and over again.
Right.
Even with the podcast, I don't do an introduction, a pre-recorded introduction, because I really want to embrace and hone in on what is my intention for this podcast and really set that intention every single time in my mind for me.
Right.
So I continually do the introduction, not recorded, but live. So it translates, all of these principles translate to us as adults as well. And I think that oftentimes our kids are just giving us this really beautiful glimpse into the gorgeousness of ourselves as well. Completely. And how we learn.
Completely. And think of it too, like when you're working on a project, or you're setting up your project, you like to have just uninterrupted time. You want to be focused. And so it's the same thing. It's giving that opportunity to children. And this, to me, translates into the home as to really respecting our children's concentration, so that if they are, even as an infant, if they're just gazing at, the plant in the corner, let them. Like, you really have to learn to observe and only kind of interact with them when you see that they're out of their flow and they've made a connection. There's brain connections have been made, and they look at you, and there you can interact with them. We tend to constantly interrupt our children.
Well, and as a question, your son is 16.
Yes.
And how do you, as a mom, observe a 16-year-old? I have to say that I saw online him skateboarding down this crazy hill, and all I could think of was, oh dear God, this is a glimpse into my life. I'm gonna cry. How do you observe that space?
Well, it's out of respect. It's out of respect for his need. 16-year-old boys especially, but I would say my daughter too, they need that adrenaline rush. It's part of their DNA. They have to kind of, conquer those fears. And so it's really about trusting and having faith in your child that they know their limits and that they will be safe. I always say that my 16-year-old boy is a very cautious daredevil, meaning that he is very in tune with what he feels capable of doing. So he does feel capable of, being on a skateboard and going down hills 50 miles an hour. Oh, yes. And it is.
And he was capable. He was capable.
And he does it. He has done it. He has also gotten hurt, so he knows his limit. And we've invested in some more gear to protect him. But this is part of his environment. This is what he has, discovered as being part of a passion. And who am I to get in the way of that because of my own fear? So it's really about respecting and really letting him know, I love you, I trust you. I know, I know you're not going to, push yourself in a place where you don't feel safe. And there have been times when he has gone with friends and there's been hills where he just didn't feel it. And I'm just, thankful that he listened to himself.
that WiseInside moment, right? Where he had a moment.
Exactly. And to me, that's part of the parenting, is really having, really trust in your child that they know that they are wise inside, that they have a knowledge, and to really encourage that to develop. I mean, there's so many times I feel that we're told, like, oh no, that's silly. Don't listen to your instincts. But I feel, to me, that is something just so powerful, and that if we can really help our children listen to what their body is telling them, we would be a lot wiser.
I agree. And I have to say, there's so many beautiful nuggets that have come out of this. And we could talk about this forever, because it's just so incredibly powerful. And I think it's a real paradigm shift for what we have experienced for parenting for many, many years. And yet, I think there's also an innate wisdom in each of us that we go, yeah, that kind of feels good. Mm-hmm. And that's that WiseInside moment, right?
Exactly.
Where we as parents go, well, God, it kind of does feel better to allow our children to follow their passions, even though it scares me, and have that trust in them. And it's scary, but it feels better than putting them in this box and this is how it's going to be. And everybody's miserable in the meantime. So,
and just to give you a little bit more on my son. So he's 16, and, I'm often telling families, encouraging families to invite their children in the kitchen, because, young children want to be there with you. They want to be doing what you're doing. They want to learn what you're doing. And oftentimes, when you're cooking or something, they're right there. And a lot of the parents I have come across, are kind of almost annoyed that they want to be with them. And I'm saying, well, they're giving you a message. They want to learn. They want to be. This is a way to connect, and I encourage cooking. So I kind of did that with my child, unbeknownst to me a long time ago. And today he's having a bunch of friends come over, and he's the one that's going to cook for them, because he's been, allowed to be in the kitchen from a very young age when he was interested. So to me, that's, I just followed his lead. Like when he, wanted to be there with me, I was like, okay, here, let me show you, how to do such and such. And today he's making crepes for his friends. So I think it's beautiful.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
It's just a powerful, it's a way for us to be empowered as parents, and also empower our children in their space.
Exactly.
Because, life does enough disempowering. We're disempowered by our friends, family, schools, government. We are all experiencing that right now, that there's some form of disempowerment in our own government as we speak. Mm-hmm. And so people are, again, finding that voice inside and rising up to the wisdom within, however that looks for them, whether in our space and time, one of the biggest, I guess, the biggest march of all time, Women's March in the United States and around the world. But having that rise up of empowerment, and what if we could just foster that power and help guide that power into their greatness, instead of squashing it and having to find it again.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yes.
I love that. And just to recap a couple of really beautiful things that you said, that we are all born with a strong life force to learn. Love that. Mm-hmm. That we're about following the child's lead, follow the child, that they have this natural instinct, and that when we have a child-driven space, there's so much learning that happens that really doesn't require a lot of effort and energy, other than being prepared for the environment, right?
Yes. And keeping it simple. I'm very much about minimalism and simplicity, because really less is more for the child. The overwhelm and the overabundance of toys and gadgets actually does them a great disservice to that beautiful concentration I was talking about.
It does. And we have literally decluttered so many times. And my husband and I actually just had this conversation again, that just because we go to the store doesn't mean that we buy a toy, or
exactly.
So we really are focusing on that on our end too. And The one thing that I really wanted to reiterate that really jives with WiseInside is trusting and having faith that our child knows their own limits. And you said it so beautifully. Who am I to get in the way of his passion because of my fear? I trust you.
Right.
And that in itself, if you take nothing from any of this, is that who am I to get in the way of his passion because of my fear? I think that is probably one of the biggest quotes I trust you. I'll quote out forever under your name. So thank you for that. So how can everybody find you? And can you give us just a brief description of your website so they can find you?
So my website is actually VoilàMontessori. So VOILA Montessori, MONTESSORI.com. And on there, if you want to stay in touch, I do have a newsletter that I send out regularly, or there is a little tab to book a free 20-minute call with me if there's, any specific questions or suggestions about, setting up the home and Montessori. I have plenty of free resources also available on my website, and I have a YouTube channel that I really put a lot of effort in these days about kind of explaining how to show activities to children. And this, comes back to that concept of simplicity and getting out of the way. So that's also available.
And I love your videos because they're super simple.
Mm-hmm.
You have a few items that we need that everybody pretty much has in their household in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly.
And you show very quickly and easily, how do I use these items to really bring out the best in my child and have an experience, a learning experience that is, again, stuff that we have in our house all over the place. We don't have to go purchase.
Exactly.
And it's the simple things, like at Christmas time when the kid plays with the box instead of the toy.
Exactly.
Simple things that actually create that magic. So thank you so much, Jeanne-Marie, for being on with me. I so appreciate you and value you. And you are just a powerful force of light and love on this planet to remind us all of the wisdom that we have within and to foster that wisdom with our children and really embrace their greatness. So thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing you with the world. It's making a difference in so many ways.
Well, it was a delight, and I thank you for all the beautiful, beautiful work that you do. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. And for those of you that are interested in finding out more about WiseInside, you can always find me on WiseInside.com. I have just released a few sessions, empowerment sessions, going back to power within, right? And coming back to that powerful space that we all are reconnecting to our own wisdom so that we can experience love for ourselves, our children, and each other on this planet. So thank you all so much for joining in. I so appreciate you and value and know that you have purpose on this planet. And I'm so glad to share this space with you. Take care and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.